Abuse, whether experienced as a child or through a violent act, must be stopped. Do we all agree? And now there's a lot of elderly abuse also. Some of those events can get very traumatic, and some can be very stressful. They often leave psychological scars. The process of healing may not be quick. But as Christians, we believe God will provide a pathway to resilience. From the beginning of the Bible, God's people faced difficulties starting with Adam and Eve. Today, as we emphasize the prevention of abuse, whether it be to children, adults, or women, men are being abused also, we want to say we should stop the abuse. Today we have three ladies who's going to speak to us about ways in which we can help. They're going to look into Bible characters who went through some kind of traumatic event, and through the grace of God, they were able to come forth. As I said, it does not happen quickly. It's a process. But also this afternoon, after lunch, I want us to continue the topic, because there is a lot that we can say or we can discuss on this topic, and which we will not be able to do right here. So this afternoon we have some testimony, and we're going to have a discussion on ways in which all of us as a church can come together to help stop, or when we see abuse taking place, that we can help report it. May God continue to bless us as we continue to walk for the Lord. We're going to at this time have Sister Maritza first.
I'm bringing this down. Is that okay? It's easier. My topic is on Adam and Eve. And we know the story of Adam and Eve when we all go through something similar as curiosity, right? Eve was curious, like everyone is, right? She wanted to see more on this tree of life and death. It was right in the middle of the Garden of Eden. It smelled good. It was a fruit that gave knowledge. It was a fruit that was prohibited, that God specifically said, do not go to that particular tree. He had a purpose. It gave life and it gave death, correct? Little did they know about death because they've never experienced it. That was something foreign. What is death? What's this that God is saying? So when Eve went to that tree, she wasn't just looking at the tree, she was also talking to the serpent, right? And we know the story. How the serpent was possessed and convinced her that there's nothing wrong. Go ahead and taste it. Who knows? You're going to have knowledge. And who doesn't want knowledge? Who would not want knowledge? Now, this was only the start of something horrifying that Adam and Eve was going to experience. Because as soon as she ate from that tree, she noticed shame. She noticed there was something that I didn't see before, and now I see it. And she shared that with her husband, and we know the story, right? Now, she went on in life, and the first thing that they both noticed was death. They noticed it in the garden, when the first tree began to wilt, when the animals began to turn on each other, when she saw that the flowers were dying. Isn't that the first death? To see that your surrounding is different? So God, in His protection and His love, had to give them something to cover, right? So He had to take away the life of a goat and give them clothing. That must have been the most surprising, the most heart-breaking thing for them to ever experience. That didn't stop there. That was only the beginning of what was coming next. Was going to be even harder for them to deal with. What that was is a beginning of trust in God. That's what that was. That God in His love and His mercy, regardless of the sin, would cover you. He had Adam and Eve's back. And He wanted them to know it, because it wasn't going to end there. So now, here's what Genesis chapter 4, verse 8 says. It says, "Now Cain said to his brother Abel, 'Let's go out to the field.' While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him." Do you think that maybe this first experience that Adam and Eve had was in preparation of what was going to come next, which was experiencing the death of both kids, Adam and Eve? Cain and Abel. One brother kills the other, and the brother that was left alive had to leave. It's overwhelmingly unpredictable, because they were both taught the same thing, right? Now, how many of you have brothers and sisters in which there's always one that has more conflict than the other? And if you don't, how many of you have children in which there's always one that has more conflict than the other? But you all teach them the same, correct? You teach them the same moral and ethical values, just like Adam and Eve. They were both taught the same. They understood more deeply what death really was about after their sin. It was the pain of Cain and Abel, twins, and having to accept what they cannot change. Now, resilience comes with this. If you've never suffered in your life, then you still have more to live for. And what I mean by that is, you need to suffer. You need to go through things in life in order to build resilience. In order for you to depend in God, you have to go through hardship. Otherwise, you're stale. Have you ever seen water, like a whole river, like no movement in it? What happens when a river is stale and it doesn't move? Stagnant, thank you. What happens? What builds in that water? it becomes what? Slimy, it grows all kinds of bugs, mold, diseases, right? No fish, because there's no movement. Now, you may not be able to change a river like that, because only certain animals can actually change a stable river. But this is in comparison to our lives. We need to move. One of the things of resilience is moving on. So I'm going to share with you 5 things that Adam and Eve built in order for them to move on after the pain. While you're in pain, do mourn. You can't heal if you don't mourn it. It'll only be something that's just hurting you, but you're numb. And being numb means that you have pain that you haven't taken it out yet. There's a verse in the Bible, I remember, it says, out of a sad countenance heals the heart. I remember, I think it's in Luke chapter 8, verse 14. You need to bring out that sadness. Adam and Eve cried a whole lot. When Seth came along, their 3rd child, life was different. They began to realize what they should have done that would have made a difference, maybe for Cain and Abel. They've done everything possible to make it right for Seth. But in order for them to get there, the first thing they had to do was lean in God. They did not have a brother and sister to say, oh, you know, I have compassion for you, I will pray for you. No, they had God. That's all. They did not need, that's everything. That is all you need. They had the most powerful person around them. And it's so easy to say that. And let me tell you, I've had a whole lot of misfortunes in my life. And I've had to learn not to lean so much just on another person to give me the right words. Yes, you do need that. But prayer on your knees, in the privacy of your home, where you can cry it out and not be judged by it, is the most healing thing. It's the right thing. And it doesn't stop there. You need to know God's promise. And you only gain it by reading His Word. The second resilience was facing the fears. Adam and Eve had to face what they had seen around them, which was death, and had to understand it, that it is only temporary. It is only till Jesus Christ dies on the cross and comes back again. That's how it was back. That was the plan B that God had for Jesus and the whole humanity, to bring them back. The third thing was accepting things they cannot change. They cannot bring back Abel. It is hard to accept that. It is the most heartbreaking thing, is that for the time, you will not see that person again. It doesn't mean you will never, ever see that person again. What it means is temporary. When Christ comes, you will see that person again, brand new, in a new light, and in in God's hands, holding you and your child. That's the God that we know. The fourth thing is look for meaning in the experiences of both past and present mistakes. You know, I mentioned about having kids. There's always one that's a little bit more rough than the others, right? So you need to look for meaning. Sometimes you just can't blame yourself. Because if you start blaming yourself way too much, you won't make a change. You're only blaming. It's better to pray about it and ask God for missionaries that will go to your child that has a rough time. Because just like you gotta admit it, the time when you were a little bit rough with your parents. Who did you listen to? Was it your parents? Or was it a friend that you had confidence in, right? I remember the people that I listened to was my Sabbath school teacher. She was the most kindest person. And I listened to her more than my own mom. And my mom, I loved her to death. But there was just something about her that I can relate to better. And sometimes that's what it takes. So the fifth resilient and the last one is grasp the important life lessons that bad things can and do happen to anyone. Understand that we are not perfect. And it can happen to absolutely any person here. So put it in God's hands. Pray about it like Adam and Eve did. I know I constantly have to do that. If I stop praying, then I will break. I promise you, I'll break. And I will never get up. Because depression takes over. And that's why it's so important to lean on God. God bless you all.
Good morning, church. I'm not as brave as Maritza is, so I'll stay here. As we continue to talk about God's path to resilience, there's another Bible character that I'm going to talk to you about in a few minutes. For many of us as Christians, the biblical stories of life and death, of loss and gain, of suffering and redemption, weave a pattern of meaning and purpose that provides a foundation for resilience. As these stories resonate with our life experiences, we gain confidence and the assurance of a capacity for resilience. The history of the Jews, our religious ancestors, is a story of continuous and dramatic resilience. The history of the Jews, our religious ancestors, is a story that illumines the inner dynamics of believing and prevailing that are the core of this human capacity. With nothing to believe in, people do not survive. The resilience of the Jewish people lies in the indulgence of their God. Whatever their folly or sinfulness, God extended forgiveness and rescued his people from the wretchedness they endured, and their resilience grew out of their suffering. Psalm 66, verses 10 through 12 says, "For you, God, tested us. You refined us like silver. You brought us into prison and laid burdens on our backs. You let people ride over our heads. You went through the fire and water, but you brought us to a place of abundance. Let's pray. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, the Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Genesis 32, verses 7 and 8 reads, In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. The character I'm talking about is Jacob. This is an intense moment. Jacob is notably altered emotionally. Not only does he feel the weight of the guilt for deceiving his brother, but 400 men led by Esau, are marching toward him. The last known communication from Esau were the words, I will kill my brother Jacob. And this we can read in Genesis 27, verse 41. Jacob is greatly afraid and distressed. His family and servants are unarmed and unprepared for battle. He divides his people and animals in 2 companies so that if half of them perish, the remaining half might escape. It's a matter of survival for himself, his family, his animals, and all his possessions. You see, Jacob was in exile for over 20 years because he had lied to his father Isaac and deceitfully received the blessing that was reserved for his brother Esau. And now Esau, his brother, wanted revenge. He wanted to kill his brother Jacob. In the normal course of events, a father's blessing would naturally pass the firstborn son. We're told that Isaac was now old and had become blind, and so he summoned Esau, whom we are told explicitly was the older son in Genesis 27, verse 1. As the story continues, we are told in verse 19 that Jacob goes to Isaac and claims to be Esau, his firstborn. But when Esau shows up, he says to Isaac, I am your son, your firstborn. Although Esau and Jacob were twins, there was no dispute that Esau was the older. The blessing was his by right. If this was so, then why did Isaac feel the need to act so privily in imparting the blessing on Esau in secret? We'll see that one of the key themes of this story is that in the struggle for blessing, none of the characters acts particularly well, and Isaac is no exception. And it's important that we know that before the twins were born, a prophecy had been given to Rebekah. The older will serve the younger. It seems that Jacob is destined to receive the blessing and not Esau. You see, both Isaac and Rebekah were guilty of another sin, that of favoritism toward their children. In chapter 25 of Genesis, we're told that Isaac loved Esau, the hunter, but Rebekah loved Jacob, the quieter, more refined character. In favoring Esau and seeking to bless him in secret, Isaac fails to take leadership in his family. He fails to bring his family together, and he fails to listen to God. But there's a twist in the story. Rebekah has been listening, and she's not happy that Esau is to receive the blessing. So she in turn summons Jacob and proposes an extraordinary plan. Jacob is to dress up as his brother and present himself to Isaac to receive the blessing for a little bit. We can credit Rebekah with good motives if we like. Perhaps she's recalling the prophecy from many years earlier. But does she really need to give God a hand? In any case, she ought to have gone to Isaac and reminded him of his responsibilities. It is a sign of the already fractured relationship in this family that she does not think to do so. Instead, she engineered this plan for Jacob to charade as his brother. This is where the scene becomes almost comical. Jacob dresses up in Esau's clothes and ties goat skin onto his hands and neck. Esau must have really been a hairy man indeed. Jacob goes into to see his father and to blessing him, and he succeeds. The blessing in verse 29 is indeed very lavish. Many nations serve you, and people bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. Isaac makes it clear that he is indeed passing on to Jacob the same blessing God gave to Abraham and that Isaac himself received. However, Esau shows up and finds that the blessing has been snatched away from him. Now, on the face of this story alone, it's easy to see Esau as an innocent party, a puppet cruelly cheated out of what was rightfully his. Esau certainly sees it that way. Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? He has deceived me 2 times. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." But in fact, Esau is probably the worst behaved of them all. Certainly the New Testament's verdict on him is unfavorable. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 16. See that no one is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance, right as the oldest son. Afterwards, as you know, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected. He could bring about no change of mind. Though he sought the blessing with tears, he was godless. So if we are to learn anything positive from the behavior of this fractured family, it must be to value what is valued. So back to Jacob's present dilemma. Jacob is now returning to Canaan, but he's still afraid of what would happen at his brother's hand. How does Jacob overcome his terror and make things right with his brother Jacob? And make it right with his brother Esau? Jacob had a dream. In his dream, the Lord allows Jacob to wrestle and struggle with him. At first, Jacob's struggle is in fear of losing his life because he assumes the stranger has been sent by Esau to kill him. He probably tries to overcome the man first, then to escape. The more Jacob wrestles, the more desperate he becomes. Perhaps he wrestles in his mind with God, questioning God, why he was called to return to Canaan, only to be caught between 2 life-threatening conditions. His uncle Laban chases after Jacob to capture him or punish him. Esau also races toward Jacob to kill him. Eventually, Jacob realizes he's gripping the arms of a heavenly being. He continues the struggle because he needs forgiveness and legitimate blessings from God. Wrestling with God allows Jacob to receive forgiveness from his brother because it is only as we have been forgiven that we can forgive or ask for forgiveness from others. As the morning dawns, Jacob demonstrates strategies that are now understood as building blocks for resilience. Number 1, he accepts that change is a part of living. He moves towards his goals. He takes decisive actions. He keeps things in perspective. And lastly, he maintains a hopeful outlook. In the biblical account of Jacob wrestling with an unknown assailant, we meet an extraordinary example of resilience. In the middle of the night, Jacob is attacked by someone or something that throws him to the ground. As they struggled, his opponent touched the hollow of his thigh, and Jacob's thigh became disjointed as he wrestled with him. But Jacob had a firm hold on his assailant, who then pleaded, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob responded, "I will not let you go until you bless me." So the assailant blessed Jacob and gave him a new name. Your name will no more be Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with humans, and you have prevailed. As the sun came up, it dawned on Jacob that he had been wrestling with his God. He limps away from this mysterious encounter, bearing both an injured thigh and a new identity. And in this embrace of injury, Jacob prevailed. Faith is a human capacity, a way of seeing the world that is registered both in the trust we place in reliable companions and in the conviction that life itself makes sense. In the spiritual exercise of faith, we put our trust in a cause larger than our individual lives. This faith supports a sense of belonging among believers and a commitment to prevailing in the long-term projects that we pursue as worthy of our best effort, even in the face of setbacks and disappointments. Resilience depends on the ability to interpret our life journey anew, to see beyond the injuries that would defeat us, past the failures of our religious and cultural traditions that so repeatedly fail us. Without the imaginative capacity of faith, we are left with a world devoid of transformation, a world confined to what we see is what you get. Such a climate leads to death of the spirit. Jacob copes sensibly with failure and avoids seeing the situation as a crisis which is escalating into an unsurmountable problem. As he prepares gifts for Esau, he demonstrates gratefulness, another aspect of resilience. The once boastful Jacob displays humility and graciousness through his verbal and nonverbal behaviors toward his brother Jacob. What Jacob doesn't know is that God is working ahead of him. In Patriarchs and Prophets, page 198, Ellen White tells us, while Jacob was wrestling with the angel, another heavenly messenger was sent to Esau in a dream. Esau beheld his brother for 20 years an exile from his father's house. He witnessed his grief at finding his mother dead. He saw him encompassed by the host of God. This dream was related by Esau to his soldiers with a charge, do not harm Jacob, for the God of his father was with him. This is a lesson for us today. We need to trust more in the Lord's protection and guidance. He goes ahead of us and prepares the way so that we do not have the trouble we anticipate. Let us claim the promise of Isaiah 52, verse 12. But you will not leave or go in peace or go in flight, for the Lord will go before you. We all have a story within us that is continually reshaped by our struggles and victories, our tests and triumphs. We may not always choose how the plot of our lives unfolds, but we can choose whether we see a tragedy as a beginning or an ending. We can choose how we stand up to our foes and make peace with battles we have lost and those we continue to fight. We can tell our stories in a way that empowers us rather than diminishes our strength. Most of all, we can use our stories for good, to lift ourselves up, and to help those around us who are still learning to stand and stand again. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you guys for coming out today. As you all know, that today is Women's Day, and the topic is resilience. And as you have heard so far, my two sisters have spoken about Adam and Eve, and also Jacob and what they went through. But I will be speaking on the characters of David and Naomi. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to come down and be a little closer to you. This has been a privilege for me to come and speak to you guys on this topic. I know a lot of us are going through stuff. Being a Christian, does not prevent us from going through, issues of life. And we know that when we come into the house of God, we can be protected from some things, but not all things. He said, they that live godly will suffer persecutions. And so as we see the story unfolded in so many Bible characters, we can see that their resilience came from, something much higher than what they could even dream or think of. And we see time and time again that these characters in the Bible, usually and most always, you will see when they improve in life, when they make great decisions, when they rule with, leadership that demand so much on them, their background, their rock, their refuge, their habitation was the Lord Jesus Christ. And as we see that with David's character, we see that he goes from being anointed when Saul could not fulfill his duty. God took away the spirit from him and gave it to David. And as we see in the book of Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, it pretty much captures all of David's entire life. And as we go forward, we see time and time again when David had to step in, before his leadership came into play, we see David, playing, for Saul because of the evil spirit. And he did such a good job, David, loved him. Not David, Saul loved David because, the evil spirit, would go away when he played for him. And so he was taken from his home, even though he was the next in line to rule Israel. And as it goes on again, we see time and time again when David was called upon, to lead, when Saul could not lead. When we see the Philistine, came to attack Israel, and no man within Saul's camp was able to go against Goliath. And what did David do? He remembered the Lord God, right, didn't he? He remembered the Lord God and said, how comes this Philistine, this uncircumcised Philistine would dare, insult God like that and his people? And we see time and time again, David go forth, and David would, take on this big task of preventing, demolition to the Israel community. So we see that David, in his ability, leaning on God to do a work that no man could do, we see him going time and time again and doing this because he trusted in his God. And he goes forward in the name of the Lord, and he annihilated, Goliath. And we see from that, not only did that was something very drastic for him to, take on, but we also see his brother, Eliab, going against David because he thought that, why is he coming here to watch a show? Because nobody was able to stand up to, the Philistine giant. So the words that came out of his own brothers now, have you left the little sheep? Who's taking care of them? But David, just put that behind him, because he came to do a work for the Lord, didn't he? And so we see God after Goliath, and, he overcame those harsh words from his brother Eliab. So sometimes we go through things, and it's not because of something that we caused, but because of people, want to, tell us that, you're not good enough to do it. You're not, strong enough. You're not big enough. But as we see David, even though he was the smallest of all of his brothers, that he was the only one that would go against Goliath. Because Saul, being the king, couldn't even do that. And nobody in his camp was able to do that. But he put that aside, because God was with him. And we see the resilience in David dependent on God at all times. And so he goes forth again. And even after he became so famous, by going out and coming in with Saul's army, that prevented a problem for him as well. Because what happened? We see David, slaying so many 10,000 and Saul his thousands, right? So there's jealousy again, and that prevented, the relationship from forming between Saul and David. And so we see time and time again that David was put in so many predicaments, not things originating from what he has done, but because of the work of God that he was doing. And so he's been attacked from everywhere. And we see time and time again that David, always leaned on the Lord. And in this instance, when Saul attacked him, because of jealousy, when the evil spirit was up on him, he threw a javelin at him and almost killed him, but David escaped. And David had a very special friend, the son of Saul. His name was called Jonathan. And it's good to have friends when you go through stuff, right? So you could lean on them as well. So not only do we run to God when we have problems, we also lean on friends and family and so forth. And so you see Jonathan coming to the aid of David. And so we would counsel him. He would, be his friend and say, when you think of being a friend, he said you should show yourself friendly in these instances. And so Jonathan was a very dear friend to David. And so he was there, to console him. And David had to eventually flee. He left behind his wife, Michal. And not only was she given to David, but we also saw that his Saul's older daughter was also given to David for wife. And later on, while he was at war, she was given to another man. So not only do we see disappointment happening time and time again in David's life, but when he was given another wife, which was from Michal, we saw that what Saul wanted him to do was to go and kill 100 Philistines and take their foreskin. And that was a dowry for marrying his second daughter. And David went above and beyond that and killed 200 instead. And so we see time and time again, David went above and beyond because the Lord God was with him. And so we see him leaning on the Lord. The Lord go out with him to fight the battle, and the Lord come back with him. And Saul knew that from the start, that the Lord was with David. And so he attacked David time and time again. Even when David, fled from Saul's sight, he went after him. When David was living in caves and so forth. But God did not prevent David from stopping and saying, praise God. But we see him, praising God, even in the caves, right? Even in the caves, when he was hungry, when he was dying, he we saw David praising God over and over and over again. But we also see David as a mere man, right? Not just, a man of God, but we see him, crying out. We see him, suffering. We see him, leaning on the community, like his family came to him. His entire family came to him, and they supported him that way. And we see also that David relied on, different things in his life, his music. We know that David is a great psalmist, right? And he would lean on his music and playing his harp and so forth. But the most important thing when he does play music is to lift up the name of the Lord. And we see him time and time again, doing these things to comfort himself, to comfort others. And not only do we see David doing that, he comforted, his men as well. And we also see that when the Amalekites came in and took David's wife and his family, his children with him, we see him going out and crying out to God, should I go after them, Lord? But he asked God for counsel, and God said, go out, you will recover, all. So we go out again, and we see him bringing back, the spoil and his family and his friends and so forth. But they wanted to stone David, They blamed David for this. But David rise above that. And he prayed to God. And God went out with him. And he was able to recover all. So again, not only do we see David in this kind of limelight, the ups and downs of his, entire life, not only is that of the exterior, but we also see a turmoil building, among his family after the incident with Bathsheba. And when he slept with her and killed her wife, killed her husband, right? We see that he had to suffer the consequence as well. And what did he do? We saw David, repenting, right? We saw him repenting because not only did he only kill one person, there's quite a few men that died that day, just to make this happen. Because when Joab was told to pull back, so that, those mighty men could kill Uriah, we saw that a lot of people died that day. So David had a lot to repent for. And the one good thing about David, we see that most times we saw him, going before God prostrate on the floor. We saw him in sackcloth and ashes. We see him also fasting and praying. David was a man after God's own heart. We all know that, and we all know the story so well. But David, was very close to God, and we know that because the Bible speaks of David so often, right? And we see him doing it over and over again. And when there was trouble, he knows where to go, right? And he does that time and time again. Not only when he himself caused it on himself, but when other people were attacking him as well, we see David go to God. And this was how he overcame so many obstacles in his life. And not only that, since the Bible covers all of his leadership from the times of Samuel anointing him, so also we see the rebellion of his sons rising up against him time and time again. We see Absalom, taking, it into his own hand to, take the Lord in his hand to make his sister Tamar, feel better of herself because of what Amnon did to her. But David even cried for that. One son kills the other. How do you rise above that, your children attacking each other like that? But David couldn't really do anything because he had not set a good example, for the children to follow. because of what happened between Bathsheba, and also it did not look good in the children's eyes. But because they were older kids. But we also see his son later on, the attack of, Adonijah, trying to take over the kingdom as well. So not only was Absalom the only one trying to take the kingdom from David, we see Adonijah do that as well. And in David's old age, there has always been, obstacles, even though he wasn't at war, with the Philistines, but there was war, inside of David's home, back and forth, going on like that. But as we see that, with David, his solace, his habitation, his refuge has always been God. So that covers my stories for David. And now I will speak of the story of Naomi. So we see that Naomi and her husband Elimelech and their two sons, Chilion and Mahlon, would travel from Bethlehem and would go also to the city of Moab because there was a famine in the land. And so they would live there for quite some time. It so happened that Naomi's husband died. And we see that it goes on to say that her two sons took wives of Moab, Orpah and Ruth. And we see also that they died as well, leaving the wife. So we have three widows, living together. And this, we can see it's been such a burden on Naomi. And Naomi, so why me? Why me, Lord? Why me? And so we see that Naomi, is grieving not only for her husband, but for two children as well. And now she is the caretaker for her two daughter-in-laws. And as we go on, we see that she heard that there was the famine had ceased in her land. And she wants to go back home now and see how she would do there. But as she's trying to say goodbye to her two daughter-in-laws, they cried and wept. And she said, go back to your family. You're young. You could take husbands. And, I don't have a child to marry anymore. I'm a whole woman. But as we see that these daughters, held on to her and didn't want to let her go. As they go further into their journey, we see that Oprah, one of them, decided to go back. But Ruth claimed her mother and would stay with her, right? And so Oprah went back, and we see that Ruth went to Bethlehem with Naomi. And as the story goes on, the whole city came out to meet with Naomi. So here, the city rallied around her, and this was healing for her. Even though they called her Naomi, she said, please don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. But as we see from the story that, she's thinking that, okay, I go out full, but therefore I'm coming back empty. So Lord, so people don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. So we see that from that, her daughter-in-law, Ruth, now takes it upon herself to say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to glean, so we can survive, because there were, you could call them pauper, because she left the house, her land, and everything that she owned, she took it with her. So they came back to a dilapidated house, so everything run down. But thanks God for, having kinsmen. And the Redeemer kinsman was going to come to their rescue, and whose name was called Boaz. And as we see Boaz coming to the rescue of Naomi and her daughter-in-law Ruth, and buying the land, for her, retrieved that for her, we see that her poverty was taken away. We see that she was now reestablished. We see that she was now praising God. We see that she now has a son again, right? We see that, and now she has a granddaughter because of the marriage to Ruth. And we see that even though she think that she came back empty, right? She wasn't empty at all. God has a plan for her, right? And He has a plan for all of us. So when we think that everything is all over, we think that we're all done and we're no good, we're useless, we can't do anything. When we cried upon the name of the Lord God, we know that He will answer us. And we see that time and time again that Naomi, she started rejoicing, right? She now has a daughter-in-law who has a son. And as we know, his name was called Obed, right? And as we see Obed, we see, the line coming through. And that's where we have, the line of David and his father Jesse and so on. And even through that, we see that Jesus, the Messiah, also came from the line of Judah. And this was prophesied so many years ago, the seed that would come and crush the head of the serpent. And we see that through all these Bible characters that God was preparing Himself a people who would bring forth the Messiah. And as we see that, the resilience of these people coming together and calling on the name of the Lord, even through their difficulties, their ups and downs, God lift them up time and time again, and they're able to praise God, even though it has been a great journey for them. But they remember the name of the Lord. Amen?
Amen? Amen. Just before we have our last hymn, thank Sister Denise and the ladies who also participated in today's program. Before we have the hymn, just a couple of announcements. Number one, next Sabbath, we are not having service here. We are having a service in Kirkwood Camp. If you don't know the directions, please let me know. There are addresses also in the back. Directions. Thank you for that. We would need some people to help from 8 to 8:30 to set up. 8:30 to 9:30 do the breakfast. South School will begin at 9:30, followed by divine service. And then in the afternoon, as we always do, we will have an afternoon program in the property. Hopefully it will not rain. So we can be outside. And then we will end up the day with a vespers. Thank you. So we are all invited, invited friends. They are all welcome to be in the Open Grace retreat. I want to remind or tell the members of the nominating committee who are just voted to be here after the service is finished. Joe Hussey, Dennis James, Melissa James,